The mystery of creation is the mystery of our own hearts and minds, and to reveal it is to realize that man is the true image of the divine, of God. He has been created in the likeness of the universe. Everything great to be found in the canvas of creation is reflected in man, and for this reason, man is signified as a microcosm in contrast to the macrocosm of the universe. All of nature manifests itself in man, who, unlike the other creatures on earth, can attain mastery over all elements, and most importantly, mastery over himself. The infinite and immortal force of oneness, known as God, or the All, creates and infuses itself into the finite and temporary, most completely into the human being. The human being therefore exists as part God, part animal, in two realities, the divine and the mortal. The Hermetic philosophy, which is intertwined with the art of alchemy in its refined form, seeks to fuse this duality of spirit and matter into divine union. The great work describes this spiritual path towards self-transcendence in its entirety. It is the process of bringing unconscious complexes into the conscious awareness in order to integrate them. In doing so, the flame of the divine is harnessed, and the alchemist becomes unified with God in holy matrimony with all of creation. The philosopher's stone is an ancient symbol of the great work's result, representing the integrated one whose divine nature shines forth within and thus without. Exoterically, the philosopher's stone fulfills the secret of scientific alchemical transmutation, turning lead into gold. But esoterically, it points to something much greater, the transformation of the self. The great work accomplishes what other cultures have termed enlightenment, moksha, and nirvana. It is both a practical work and a transcendent mystical one, relying on gnosis, personal mastery, and experiential knowledge attained through intimate spiritual encounters. The heart of the Hermetic teachings is the realization that the individual is fundamentally no different from the Supreme. Throughout the ages, the records of alchemy were calculated to mislead those who have gone abroad thoughtlessly, seeking for perfection outside of themselves, which was to be found only by seeking within themselves through intuitive faith. The pseudo-alchemists of the past dreamed of physical gold and tempting but impossible transformations. They worked with sulfur, mercury, and salt of the mines, torturing animals, dead and living, in vain. The means they employed were from literal readings of alchemy. They were ignorant of the internal fire so essential to the accomplishment of the Hermetic great work. In truth, to accomplish the great work, we require no vials, no fancy laboratories. The self is the true laboratory of the Hermetic mysteries. Life is the subject, the grand distillatory. We are born and pass through time in a process of growth and decay, only to step out of it all through death's doorway, at which point we confront the spiritual realm and our relationship to it in its purity, without the veil of matter. The great work prepares us to confront the doorway of death with ease and courage. In order to do so, we must be willing to treat this lifetime as an initiation. It is by emotion, energy in motion, that our own spirit is moved into matter. Emotion is a midpoint between the two. We ferment reality with emotion, evolving matter through a process that can only be known as much as it is felt. Spirit descends into matter through the inherent creative mechanism of consciousness. This is the supreme Hermetic principle of as within, so without, as above, so below, attributed to the highly elusive figure Hermes Trismegistus, who in the Western esoteric tradition acts as the father for all things transmutative. As within, so without informs us that creation runs on a mechanism of input inspiring output, that the spiritual inspires the mundane. This is why in the Hermetica, Hermes Trismegistus begs us to not separate ourselves from the divine as a lesser entity. He writes, "If then you do not make yourself equal to God, you cannot apprehend God, for like is known by like. Leap clear of all that is corporeal, and make yourself grown to a like expanse with that greatness which is beyond all measure. Rise above all time, and become eternal. Then you will apprehend God. But if you shut up your soul in your body, and abase yourself, and say, 'I know nothing, I can do nothing, I am afraid of earth and sea, I cannot mount to heaven, I know not what I was, nor what I shall be,' then what have you to do with God?" When we forget that we are the representatives of the eternal, who are able to, as Hermes says, rise above all of time, rise above the mortal world, we end up tethered to less than desirable realities and situations. We operate in a largely blind way, accepting behaviors, beliefs, traditions, rituals, and so-called knowledge that undermines the soul's ability to shine brightly and heroically. We become tainted versions of ourselves, producing experiences that give us emotional feedback loops of distress. The world, then, examples these emotional feedback loops of distress in demonstrations of war, societal upheaval, social movements, and widespread deception. As within, so without, the world simply mirrors the ignorance of its inhabitants. Evil is not simply the root of our suffering. Ignorance is. Ignorance acts as a demon, inspiring emotional distress from our conscience that manifests into our lives. O ye people, earth-born folk, ye who have given yourselves to drunkenness and sleep and ignorance of God, be sober now. Cease from your surfeit, cease to be glamored by irrational sleep. However, when we remember that we are held in the cradle of the One, unified with the mind of all things, we give ourselves the ability to step into a process of transmutation through forfeiting our ignorance in exchange for wisdom. This age-old wisdom tells us that creation is beautiful and the cosmos eternal. This age-old wisdom tells us that divine intelligence produces all things, whether branded good or evil, right or wrong, as all is perfect because all is in one. Using the Hermetic philosophy, we may reach a salvific unification of our own mind with the divine mind, of our own soul with the spirit of the all. The one is in all, and the all is in one. The task of the initiate of Hermetic alchemy is to ascend through the planetary spheres through the purification we are offered, through recognizing the beauty of creation, until reuniting with this divine oneness. This unification allows us to step out of mortal consciousness into an eternal one, giving us the key to transcend death. In the beginning, there is unity. Unity separates into two fundamental forces, which, like the negative and positive poles of a battery, generate everything. Hermes describes them as light and life, which become mind and soul. We experience them as thoughts and feelings. The oneness of God is both light and life. These two forces are the parents of the mind of the cosmos. Hermes says, "The man who hath mind in him, let him learn to know that he himself is deathless." Nothing can be excluded from the mind of God. Nature, thought, emotion, all that is man-made, all that is light, all that is dark, all that is true, and all that is false, it's all rooted within the one. Hermes says, "Allow the mind to merge with mind. Let it flow out upon the great curve of consciousness. Let it soar on the wings of the great bird of duration, up to the very circle of eternity."